Well, Justice
Thank
Khampepe,
you.
welcome.
Thank you very much. Ranjita, may I just ask, who amongst us would have predicted that the whole scourge of COVID-19 would invade the world? It clearly identified itself as enemy number one of the globe, where lives have been severely affected and has caused a large-scale catastrophe in countries and families alike. At this stage, there is no vaccine. I mentioned the COVID-19 pandemic in order to illustrate my own life experience, which is never allow adverse prevailing circumstances to define your destiny. I come from a country that for centuries was colonized and in later years was under the yoke of apartheid, which saturated Black people in racial discrimination and oppression. Apartheid was, of course, declared as a crime against humanity by the United Nations. I was born in Soweto, which is the biggest township in the country under these trying times. The main architect of apartheid, Dr. Verwoerd, declared that Black people should be hewers of wood and growers of water. In keeping with this, he in fact gave Black people an inferior education because Black people were only regarded as providers of cheap labor to white people who owned the economy. Numerous laws were obviously enacted in order to oppress Black people and strip them of their dignity. I am a product of this cruel and inferior education, which was labeled as Bantu education. After completing my high school education, I wanted to be a lawyer in order to fight the unjust system of apartheid. I was greatly influenced at the time in my chosen career by the likes of the late former President Nelson Mandela, who at the time was serving a life sentence for fighting for the liberation of Black people. I wanted to study at an acclaimed university in the country, which was the Witwatersrand University, and was situated where I was staying in Johannesburg. Because of the apartheid system, I, however, could not just enroll there, but had to obtain a special permit from the government granting me permission to study at the university. Needless to say, Ranjita, this permission was refused. I was then compelled to enroll for my law degree at a tribal university meant for Black people. But even there, my experience at this university was not a happy one. After registering for a law degree, I attended my very first class at the law school, full of excitement and zeal. The white lecturer walked into the class and exclaimed that there were too many women in that class. He informed us that law was not meant to be studied by women. He advised us to deregister from the law faculty immediately and instead go and register in other faculties like social work, which were meant for women. He advised that if we did not deregister, we would all likely fail our law degree. Oh, sorry. I was determined, however, to prove my professor wrong. So I not only studied to pass the course, I studied to be the top student in my class. I managed to prove him wrong, even under those trying circumstances. At the completion of my studies, the Dean of the Law Faculty recommended that I should apply for a scholarship at Harvard Law School in order to study for an LLM degree. At that stage, I didn't even know that there was a school called Harvard, because one was living under the yoke of oppression, which did not allow one to see further from one's nose. At the beginning of 1980, I was accepted to study at Harvard Law School, and at the same time, I was also accepted as a fellow at the Legal Resources Center. The Legal Resources Center was the first public interest law firm in the country whose mission was to provide legal assistance for human rights violations. It was led by the late Arthur Charles Carson, who later became the first Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court of South Africa, when our country became a democracy. Whilst working at the Legal Resources Center, I was exposed to the dehumanizing treatment that Black workers were receiving at the hands of their white employers. At that time, if an employer did not like your face, he would tell you to leave, but then was required to give you at least a 2 days notice. But the circumstances allowed employers to abuse their workers to such an extent that they did not even give them the 2-day notice that they were required to be given by the law. And these are the people who came and crowded the doors of the Legal Resources Center seeking assistance to be able to put food on the table. The experience that I gained at the Legal Resources Center motivated me to carve my career path as I became determined to specialize in labor law in order to alleviate the plight of our people. In July 1980, the Legal Resources Center agreed to interrupt my fellowship program to pursue my studies at Harvard Law School. Before going to Harvard, I had never been in an aeroplane and had never been in the company of white people in a university setting. Suddenly, I was thrust into a situation where I had to travel thousands of kilometers to a place which was outside my township and be in an environment where I had white students as my colleagues. Once again, as I had done at the Legal Resources Center, I realized that white people were humane after all, and there was nothing wrong in having them as your neighbors. I obtained my LLM degree in record time in 1982 and received a letter of commendation on my LLM thesis from my professor, David Smith. In that letter, David Smith recorded that I was going to be a great lawyer in my country and that he was glad that I would share my insights with other scholars in my country. I obviously did not take his prediction seriously, as I was an oppressed person in my country. With hindsight, this was an important prediction because look at where I am now. I am a justice of the Constitutional Court, which is the highest court in South Africa. I was the first woman acting Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court, and I have been appointed by President Mandela as a commissioner of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission under the leadership of the Archbishop Desmond Tutu. After obtaining my LLM degree, I returned to the Legal Resources Center to complete my fellowship. As I wanted to practice as a labor lawyer, I first had to serve articles of clerkship with a law firm that conducted practice in labor law. Those with that kind of capacity were white law firms which did not employ Black candidates. I applied for articles with almost all of those law firms, but was unfortunately unsuccessful. The same law firms, the only law firm that called me for an interview later told me that they had done so in order to satisfy their curiosity to see this Black woman who was claiming to have an LLM degree from Harvard Law School. By this time, I was at the end of my teeth and frustrated and considered leaving the legal profession altogether. I had even secured a job in a field outside the legal profession. It was only through the intervention of Arthur Charles Carlson that the law firm that initially refused my application reconsidered its decision and registered my articles. Even then, it was with a caveat that after completion of my articles, I would not be considered for a permanent position in that firm. After completion of my articles and faced with two disadvantages, one being a woman and the other being Black, I took a plunge and established my own law firm. My law firm specialized in labor law and human rights litigation. I was probably one of the only law firms that acted for two of the biggest trade union federations at the time, being COSATU and NACTU. And I also represented NACTU at the ICTU, which was an entity that provided funds for trade unions. Whilst I was practicing in my law firm, the late former President Nelson Mandela appointed me to be a commissioner in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. You served in this commission because of the stride you had shown as a human rights activist. I served in the Amnesty Committee of that body, and our function was to offer amnesty to perpetrators who made a full disclosure of gross violations of human rights that they had perpetrated against people. I was appointed as an acting judge of the High Court. This appointment enabled me to act as the chair of the Amnesty Committee's panel of hearings. In October 2000, I was appointed by former President Thabo Mbeki as a judge of the High Court, and in 2007 was appointed as a permanent judge of the Labor Appeal Court. In the same year, I was appointed as the judge president of the Labor Court. In 2005 till February 2006, I was appointed by former President Thabo Mbeki to chair the Commission of Inquiry into the mandate and location of the scorpions, which was known as the Khampepe Commission. And in 2004, was appointed together with the then Deputy Chief Justice, Dikgang Moseneke, to oversee the elections, the presidential elections in Zimbabwe. In our report, which became an issue of great interest as the nation, as the whole world will remember, we found that the elections had not been conducted in a free and fair fashion. In October 2009, I was appointed by former President Jacob Zuma as the judge of the Constitutional Court. And in November of 2018, I served as the first woman acting Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court. That is the journey I have traveled, and which has taught me that you must never let adverse circumstances to define your destiny.
Thank you, Justice, for that extraordinarily inspiring story.